Yeah, okay. So thanks to everybody who gave you talks this morning. They've been really great, and I've actually learned a heck of a lot today. Right, today I'm going to highlight three things I want to talk about. First of all, we've talked a little bit back in the shed about overseer and about the importance of that getting your data accurate. And there was a mention about the inaccuracies of overseer and how we're going to handle that in research going forward. But a large chunk of that is actually getting good data. Large chunk of that inaccuracy. So it's really, really important as farmers to get as much accurate data as you can. And part of the Healthy Rivers draft that Mike Scarsbock was talking about was if there's data missing, then the proposal is to give the farmers 75% of the average of what people are getting within your subcatchments or regions. So yeah, so that highlights the need to get your data absolutely accurate, because once you've set your reference points, it's set, and then you're sort of got to move on from there. And that accuracy of getting things right, not so much data, but getting things right, was highlighted with what we've been doing on our farms here with the nutrient budgeting as well. Also, just like to mention briefly that farmers get often quite concerned when you see a nutrient budget done on farm and then somebody else does it and the numbers are different. Now that's not necessarily an overseer issue. There's actually different reasons for doing different nutrient budgets, and we're working as an industry at the moment to get them properly defined and accepted. And we're talking about a predictive nutrient budget, which is often used for the likes of a fertiliser recommendation. You don't have any hard data, you're looking forward to the year coming ahead, and so you're estimating everything. And that shouldn't ever be used for regulation, that budget. You've got a year-end one, which is one which would most likely be used for regulatory purposes, and that's you're standing there in the end of June and you're looking backwards at what's happened. You've got real data going into that nutrient budget. And then you've got a scenario nutrient budget, which is where you're grabbing your year-end nutrient budget typically and saying, well, look, what if I did this? How would that impact on my nutrient losses or my nutrient flows around the farm? And is it any advantage to me or is it a disadvantage to me? So those are the three basic types of nutrient budgets we're trying to get accepted within the industry across the country. And you could very well have three different outcomes from that. So the important part you guys will be really interested in is how the end-loss number is looking. Well, if you look in your books on page 64, you'll see a table there, and we've got some numbers down the bottom, second to last line, end loss to water, 14, 15, 42, 15, 16, 43, and predictive for this year ahead of 44 for the 16, 17. Those of you who can remember the other sessions that we've had will think, well, hey, hang on, wasn't our number lower than that before? And yes, we had reported a number of 33. Now, why this number has changed, and it highlights the importance of sitting down and really talking with the person doing your nutrient budget for you about what's happening on your farm and how you manage that farm, is that Ian mentioned we went from 3 blocks to 7 blocks, and then we also put in the soils more accurately than had been done before. And so we got that data out of SMAP, which was available here, and put the soil order in. And those two factors were the main drivers of why that number's increased from 33 to approximately 44. Okay? So it really highlights the need for doing this. And we talked about this with Doug, and Doug said, well, we've got to put that out there. We want to be totally transparent about what's happened. And that is what has happened. Okay? Now then, we've done the 14, 15 and 13, 14 years accurate as we can. We can't guarantee that those will be the final numbers. As Doug mentioned, we're not sure exactly what changes will happen with the Healthy Rivers plan. There's already a little bit of a draft out from EW about some of the changes they'd like to make and how data goes into overseer, and that will most likely have an impact on those numbers. Not majorly, but they could move 2 or 3 either way. So with the 16-17 year, we see that number's 44. Now if we said that 15-16 is the reference point of 43, we're 1 kilo higher. At this stage, I don't consider that an issue, because we're at the beginning of the year, and then we can now look forward and look at mitigation strategies to get that number back down again and to meet our reference point. So that highlights the really important point of doing that nutrient budget at the beginning of the year to look forward, so you know where you're likely to be heading, and do we really need to do something to get that number back down again. I really think that's about all I wanted to highlight today. I think, was there anything else, Doug, you wanted me to?
I think, I guess I guess the other really important thing is that, you know, something I really want to get across. We're not 10 or 12 kgs worse off than we were this time last year. It's the exact same inputs. It's just over a more accurate block setup. There's the changes. We've actually made a much more efficient system because we've budgeted on growing a lot more homegrown feed. So we've actually, through doing that, been able to budget bringing in 200 tonne of less brought-in feed, and that's coming through less palm kernel. And so it's a challenging one to get your head around, because in essence we've actually created a more efficient system. But when you replace one feed source with another feed source, and if that feed source which is being replaced has got a higher protein level, which in this case it does, the pasture that we're growing on top of the palm kernel has got a higher protein level, so therefore it has pushed our nitrogen levels up. But it's a bit of a challenge one, because I guess for me, I've always looked at it and thinking, you know, what drives nitrogen leaching? Soil types, rainfall, stocking rate, imported feeds, fertiliser. So if you're reducing imported feed and maintaining your fertiliser inputs, theoretically you should be dropping your nitrogen leaching. But I guess it's just important to emphasise that isn't actually the case in this situation. Replacing one feed with another feed, albeit more efficient, is in this situation still sort of maintained our existing position. So yeah, probably wanted to get that point across as well.
Yeah, and Doug's dead right there about that. And if we look over the page beside that one with the table on, there's the 5 factors of nitrogen loss there. And Ian and I and a couple of others in our team developed that for a roadshow we did with Dairy Women's Network around informing dairy farmers within their catchment groups about what drives nitrogen loss. And you see the animals at the top. Now that's the biggest driver of nitrogen loss through that urine patch, which you've often heard about before. But changing that feed supply changes the amount of nitrogen that's in the urine. And so that's where that whole thing comes in. And it's how you manage that your cows around your crops as well, your grazing. So it's just that to reinforce Doug's comments there. The actual fertiliser direct leaching is very, very low in most situations. You know, sure, pumice soils with 2-3 metres of rain, you're going to have a different situation. But in most situations, nitrogen fertiliser is very minimal direct leaching. It's that pasture it grows and how much of that nitrogen ends up in the urine. Yeah. Well, any questions about that?
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to draw attention to the pH levels on the 7 blocks. And if you look at page 62, I'd like to ask, were you surprised with some of those blocks at the lower end of the recommended range of pH of 5.5 to 5.9? And I see that your advice has been to put on 2 tonnes per hectare over the entire farm, but you will do this in a sequential of 0.5 tonnes per hectare per year, and you expect to raise at 0.2. Now, is that the best we can do with the investment in lime, bearing in mind that we've got 400 tonnes of lime to get on this farm? So I pose the question to the board and to the farm committee, is that the best we can do, bearing in mind the results from some trials of people that have looked at lime and looked at the multiple benefits of lime and the effect on soil quality, moisture holding capacity, clover, earthworms, the whole biomass.
Thanks, Ross. Great point you've raised. Totally agree. You know, there's some as low as 5.4 there, and then some obviously 5.9 is fine. You know, the target would be at 5.8 and above, and so some of those are well off the pace. And there's been a recent round of lime even onto this paddock, I think this week, wasn't it, Tom? And the differential application we were putting.
I guess these would have already improved quite dramatically since these tests were taken. So we did 2 tonne across the more severely affected blocks before at the end of autumn. We've gone and done another 2 tonnes on those blocks again now. So we hope with that basically 4 tonne per hectare on those more affected blocks, that will bring those up to what would be optimum pH levels now. The 0.5 that's in there is basically what we're suggesting would be the annual application to maintain those levels going forward. But certainly we hope after this recent application that's gone on in the last week, which has again covered those higher risk areas, that we should be starting to get up to what would be optimum, and then going forward would maintain those rates.
Just on that table, the thing I'd just highlight is it's got 1 to 7, so that's the blocks, and then A to D. A to D were for the cropping, and so they're a different depth. So they're 15 centimetre, the others are 7.5. So just want to highlight that, so don't compare them directly. Yep.
With the debate around nitrogen, has there been given any thought to using ammonium sulphate, which doesn't volatilise?
Always looking at ways to apply nitrogen better. One of the things is to avoid the cool season, and there's been a lot of effort here to avoid the cool season. As far as what sort of product and what time, Overseer is what is predicting the losses, and so the question in relation to particular types of fertiliser would be, is it recognised in Overseer yet? If not, is the science strong enough for it to be put on the list to go into Overseer, or is it not? So, yeah, in principles, what's the best product, what's the timing, Overseer is the tool, so is it recognised in there? But yeah, certainly different products have different losses. There is some other work going on with MPI about greenhouse gases, and certain products have a higher loss factor into greenhouse gases for New Zealand as well, and there's been some sort of macro scale analysis on pros and cons and use of different products. So, yeah.
No, I'd only comment that a lot of the mitigations, or some of the mitigations we use to reduce our nitrogen losses actually increase greenhouse gas nitrogen losses. So we could get into a very big balancing act at some stage. So the comments you make and raise are really important to debate, to find good ways around what's coming.
Okay, and just one final point: why just the fixation on calcium, not bringing out magnesium using magnesium carbonate? Yeah, we're talking about if you're trying to increase pH, the quickest way to do it is using a calcium and magnesium carbonate. Will lift your pH in your soils quicker than straight lime.
My only comment on that would be the economics of one versus the other. My broad understanding was that the lime, calcium carbonate is economically more beneficial just from a commercial point of view, but happy to have a discussion in the break, or Mark T may have a comment, but yeah.
Nitrogen to atmosphere, and one of the mitigations you're doing is the wetland, which is going to increase that. Direction of prevailing winds coming this way, dry soils, sandy soils on top. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring lucerne into the system, just to kind of offset, capture more of that in an atmosphere.
Yeah, I think Roger's going to talk in a moment about the wetland in general. This farm does dry out, and so deep-rooted options, and that's one of the reasons chicory has been put in, partly because of that drying off in that time of year. Lucerne's a wonderful plant, whether it's the right one and whether it's, can handle the grazing and a dairy rotation, but yeah, all factors.
Whole farm system, not in a dairy rotation, so if you're just capturing it as a supplement block, basically at the moment with your chicory option, where it falls flat, it's just knocking your rates a bit higher, so that you're actually having to bring decay in the system in November, and you can need supplement at the end when your tree gets sprayed out. So if you actually had a block set aside just for helping fill those gaps, and effectively you have a lower stocking rate on your farm, you haven't allowed to put the stocking rate on those systems better, your whole farm system would work a lot better. And capture some of that, offset some of the atmospheric losses. Recycling through system.
Any idea? There's going to be some major debates, arguments, call them what you want, on the ultimate farm system, where this farm heads overall, whether it's a high input system or a low input system, and then a lot of the tweaks and crops and those sorts of things. So any ideas people have got, feel free on the clipboards where you put your registration name to jot some thoughts on the back of those. And as a farm management committee, as we're starting down those, thrashing around ideas and debates, happy to look at any of those options, because there's a trade-off. We're serving a number of masters, we want good production and profit, and we're trying to be as efficient from an environmental point of view, and then there's mitigations. So, yep, open to those considerations.